Hi, welcome to Inspiring You with Sylvia Yu. I'm thrilled to have Dr. Jakub. He's a really amazing person and the executive director of the Economics of Mutuality Foundation. Dr. J is an international speaker and teacher of business school professors. He was a senior director for external research at Mars Inc., the company behind M&Ms and Snickers. He's also the co-author of Completing Capitalism: Heal Business to Heal the World. Jay also holds a doctorate from Oxford University. It's great to see you, Jay. Welcome.
That's you, Sylvia. Thank you for having me on your program.
Well, Jay, let's start off by talking about your current work. I know you're part of the Flourishing Foundation as well. And can you just take us back to how did EOM get birthed and what is its mission, especially in Asia?
Certainly. Yeah, I am privileged to lead an organization called the Economics of Mutuality Foundation, which was spun out as the internal think tank of Mars Incorporated, a very unusual kind of family-owned, privately held company with a very long-term time horizon perspective and a desire to challenge orthodox business thinking with a unit like this internal think tank that was led by the chief economist that helped him lead it from the global headquarters of Mars for many years. And the Economics of Mutuality Foundation really is about helping transform business for the common good, but in ways that are actually good for business and that scale. So even though it's a nonprofit public benefit foundation, it owns a mutual value labs entity, which is a consultancy that goes into companies across all sectors of the economy, including Mars Incorporated, and helps them deliver more purposeful business outcomes, actually, that are measurable using different forms of capital, which we can talk about a little more if you're interested in how this works. There's also a role in the foundation that I lead for transforming business education through the creation of centers of excellence in a number of leading business schools, including one we just launched in Hanyang University's business school in Seoul. And we were just delighted to have you there with us for its birth, and also a university called Erasmus in the Netherlands, and soon one in Norway at the Bergen Norwegian School of Economics.
That's great. Congratulations on
Thank you.
launching these important initiatives. Yes, please do go into the nitty-gritty. And so please, Jay,
Sure.
enlighten us.
Well, you did ask me when we started, how did this get started? So maybe I'll just start there quickly. John Mars, one of the owners of Mars Incorporated, again, an entirely family-owned, privately held company with revenues about $55 billion, about 150,000 associates now. Back in the beginning of 2007, just as I was joining the company, he asked this wonderful question that shareholders never ask in the world of financial capitalism, which is, what should the right level of profit be for the company? And this right level of profit in financial capitalism is almost always assumed to be as much as you can squeeze out of the value chain partners. And John, I think, was thinking a bit more expansively about this and thinking that there must be an optimum level of profit above which you're taking too much as a company from your value chain partners. You create this squeezing effect of one value chain partner squeezing another and another. That creates a disequilibrium. That disequilibrium ultimately disrupts your business, and you never see where that disruption is coming from. And so this question was put to the CEO. The CEO came to the internal think tank, and off we went, looking at this idea of how much is actually enough. And that led us really to start to think about the fact that, in the management literature of business schools, they actually teach different forms of capital beyond just financial capital. And, in business, you only manage what it is that you measure. And if you only have metrics like you do in the financial capitalist model to measure one form of capital, financial capitalism, you're put in a position where you're kind of leaving on the table a very significant amount of value creation potential that is available to you in things called social capital, which actually is measurable, and you can manage it and you can mobilize it. We figured out how to do that over the years. It's about trust, social cohesiveness, the capacity to work collectively in a community, human capital, which is about understanding in any corporate culture what really is the motivation for your employees to perform in the company. So there are a small number of metrics that actually can account for the things that people really care about, what really is the motivator for them to have well-being in the workplace. And once you know what that is in your own company, you can start to create some low-cost interventions to grow what is important to your workforce. And when you do that, you get these performance benefits that have to do with talent attraction, talent retention, optimization of performance. And then the third form of non-financial capital that we work with in this model is called natural capital, which is about your environmental inputs. So what kind of natural resources do you actually use for your business, whatever it may be? Mars was a manufacturing or is a manufacturing business. So there's quite a bit of natural capital that's utilized. And so rather than focusing on just an external benchmarking and reporting type of a approach, which just looks at something like carbon footprint, which is fine for external benchmarking and reporting, but that's a lagging indicator. We've kind of focused on our work on leading indicators. So what are the simple metrics that if you can get a better understanding of what your inputs are and can provide some help to managers and how to measure those inputs of natural resources, that you can actually create a smaller footprint and become much more efficient in how you use those resources. But ultimately, Sylvia, the way this works is it comes down to purpose into practice through strategy. Most companies tend to look at purpose as profit, how much profit that they can actually generate. And we like to say that the purpose of business is actually not to create profit. Of course, that's like the fuel needed to drive the car. But the purpose of business is to create profitable solutions for the problems of people, place, and planet, not to create profit by creating problems for people, place, and planet. And so the purpose of business is really about what external problem your business unit actually is there to resolve, to solve. And once you kind of decenter yourself from your ecosystem of stakeholders from which, in pure financial capitalism term, business leaders are trying to extract value and turn that into profit for shareholders, we kind of reverse that and think about an ecosystem of stakeholders as an opportunity actually to co-create more value by putting purpose in the center rather than profit in the center, and orienting that purpose towards solving an external problem. So that's kind of like the starting point and the building blocks for how we get going.
Oh, it's so refreshing to hear. And do you have a model business that you've worked with? Then how did it improve? How did you guide the company?
Well, one company that I think is probably a good example because it's one of the kind of gold standard crown jewel companies inside the Mars portfolio, where this economics of mutuality framework for what we call mutual value creation was birthed. We're independent of Mars now, but they're still a major client. They have a company called Royal Canin. And Royal Canin is kind of extraordinary because they grow at double digits no matter what the circumstances are. So they're always outperforming. And yet they don't typically invest in advertising. So a lot of their sales is done by word of mouth. And their leadership inside Mars really got motivated early on by what we were offering in terms of looking at social, human, and natural capital and leveraging the ability to measure, manage, and mobilize those different forms of capital and put them to the service of stakeholders in an ecosystem around a purpose that would be greater than just creating more profit for the company. And so we engaged them early on. And later in this work, one of the Mars family owners, who actually chairs the board of directors of our Economics of Mutuality Foundation, Stephen Badger, and the chief financial officer of Mars, they decided that they really needed a proof point to demonstrate to the business without any ambiguity that this creates a superior form of value creation that includes growth and earnings. And so they said, okay, let's make available whatever data and whatever help from the business is needed to really go into a piece of work that you've done for Royal Canin that's purpose-driven, and let's demonstrate where the return on investment was for the company. So very simply, we started with purpose, and we helped the company understand that maybe the big problem that they're in business to solve, because they have a very expensive nutraceutical type of pet food for dogs and cats that actually helps prevent kidney disease and other types of illnesses from happening. It costs a lot of money as well, is actually, let's start with a purpose that would be to improve the health of all cats and dogs. They like that. They adopted that as their purpose. And then we put that in the center of their ecosystem of stakeholders. We use that purpose as a lens to then identify a broader set of ecosystem stakeholders that the company would have to work with if they actually truly wanted to deliver a better world for pets and dogs, a greater health for cats and dogs. And so we started there. We mapped out what that ecosystem of stakeholders looked like. We put all those on there: breeders, veterinarians, the pet owners themselves, the retail outlets that sell the product, all those kinds of things. We mapped those out. We used some interviewing techniques to go in and surface where each of those key stakeholders were actually suffering from a problem that was contributing to them having a poorer performance in service of this ecosystem to help the company deliver its purpose. And then we zeroed in on one particular pain point in that ecosystem that we then went to the business and said, look, we think that if you created a low-cost intervention that we could help you with, that to help this ecosystem stakeholder partner fix its problem, that actually that would release significant performance for your ecosystem that we can measure, and then we could see what the ROI is and the other benefits as well. So what we discovered actually was that this pet food company was actually using word of mouth in veterinary clinics through veterinary nurses to talk to the pet owners about what the nutritious value was of the product, that if they fed their cats and dogs this pet product, actually they probably wouldn't be visiting the clinic to bring treatment to the sick animal. And we discovered actually that the veterinary clinics that were working with Royal Canin, the veterinary nurses were attriting at a really high level. They weren't trained properly, they were demoralized, and the attrition level was disrupting the whole performance of the clinic. The veterinarians had to do the work of the veterinary nurses and so forth. So to make a long story short, we created an intervention to train all of the nurses in all the veterinary clinics that they were collaborating with. It was over 1,000 veterinary nurses. It cost the company about 250,000 US dollars. It's a company that generates revenues of 7 or 8 billion a year. So it was a very small investment for them on the front end. We went ahead and helped implement this training regime, and then we started to measure what happened. And very simply, we discovered some extraordinary things that actually surprised us as well as the CFO of the company. One was that the attrition rate of these veterinary nurses dropped dramatically by about 40% almost immediately. They were then much more motivated, better trained, started engaging the pet owners. The clinic started performing much better. The veterinarians could do their job. Everyone can do their job better. The pet owners were happier. They had a higher level of social capital because they were now trusting the clinics to provide the right guidance for having healthier pets. The pets were actually healthier. We can measure that as well. And then when it came to the profit and loss statement of the company, the P&L, where you have a top line, which is about your growth, and a bottom line, which is about your earnings, we discovered that the bottom line profit had actually grown by $4.4 million
Oh, wow.
in terms of new sales revenue that just came from this intervention. And the top line story was even more exciting. It was something like $14.4 million benefits that were intangible. That had to do with things like not having to go out and recruit and train new veterinary nurses because everybody was functioning more properly. So together, we discovered that this $250,000 intervention was actually delivering X return on investment. Now,
Incredible.
I can't say that this approach of putting purpose at the center, of working with co-creating value, solving problems for some of your ecosystem partners, and then watching how the ecosystem performs better to deliver that purpose is going to deliver 17x ROI in every instance. But I am confident that actually companies will perform better by being more purposeful, by solving the problems of others instead of just extracting value from them. I wanted to walk you through that one example because I think it's a very clear
It's
example
incredible.
of how you don't have to trade profit to do good. You
Yeah.
can have both.
You're shifting mindsets, really. And what are some of the major challenges that you encounter?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and the challenges are many, and I think they have to do more around addressing the disbelief because you tend to stand
Yes.
where you sit and where your competitors are when you're a corporate business leader. And so, if all the business schools are teaching financial capitalism and not expanding your horizon to a broader set of metrics and management practices that you can actually use to create more holistic value, that also benefits your top and bottom line. And all your competitors tend to work with just the financial metrics of a financial profit and loss statement, then you're less willing to kind of take the risks to do something different. You don't want to step out of the boat. You don't want to kind of take the time to really discern what could be a new and exciting way of doing things that could be beneficial to many, many more stakeholders than just your shareholders without scaring your shareholders as well. So I think trying to get the attention of these businesses that there is another way of doing this, and we've been doing this, Sylvia, now, first inside Mars and now outside for the last 5+ years. For almost 2 decades, we've been working on this for over 19 years. And so we have a growing body of case studies across different industries, different types of companies. We not only work with the food and beverage industry with Mars, coming out of that company, but we work in the retail space, in the high-tech industry. We've been working increasingly in the financial services industry with banks, including really large banks, but also SME type of banks as well, with fragrance companies. So there's lots of different corporate experiences now, and we're finding that, of course, we have to adapt this approach to the context and to the geography and to the culture that we're working in and to the market forces. But actually, the way in which you implement economics of mutuality, the way I kind of just laid it out, is a pretty standardized, simplified approach to being able to bring more mutual value creation to what businesses can deliver. And from an individual sort of motivation, which you may ask me at some point in this interview, I'd just like to kind of jump to the fact that
Please do.
I actually I spent a lot of time looking at what nonprofits have tried to do, what governments have tried to do to solve the big problems of people, community, and the planet, and they failed over and over and over to significantly move the needle. Why isn't business motivated to do this? Business actually may be the only organization in the world, if you could think of it in the macro sense, that has the throw weight and the reach to solve these big problems. And
Absolutely.
actually, if we can demonstrate to companies that by solving external problems, big problems of society, the economy, the environment, communities, that actually they can be more resilient, they can be more profitable, and they can be sustainable over generations, including family ownership for those companies that are private. Why wouldn't you want to operate that way? I mean, we figured out, for example, last year that a number of our clients were really motivated by the fact that loneliness, especially with the COVID period coming out of
Yes.
that, had become a mental health challenge of epic
Absolutely.
proportions, a real epidemic. And so a large beer manufacturer called Asahi in Japan actually engaged us in a number of different geographies to say, look, people are turning in a very negative, destructive way to alcohol when they're very lonely. There must be something we can do as a beer manufacturer to have a positive impact that's also good for our business.
Mm.
So we helped them do that.
Oh,
We helped
that's
a Mars unit
encouraging.
that wanted to address loneliness as well. We partnered with the world's leading academic, Pamela Qualter, from the United Kingdom in loneliness studies, and to put together a report to demonstrate how these companies literally created interventions that wound up actually improving their business performance, but they actually moved the needle on loneliness and showed companies how if you want to participate in this business versus loneliness kind of world, use business to help solve a huge mental health challenge, then come and join us. And we're finding other companies are now wanting to engage us to figure out how they can do it, how they can play a positive role. And there are lots of issues like this, Sylvia, like financial exclusion, aging demographics, that we want to take on in this business versus kind of approach.
Wow, that's I wholly agree. Influence the influencers, right? With one
Yes,
phone
absolutely.
call, they can move the needle, they can make things happen. And with loneliness, it's the equivalent of smoking 19 cigarettes a day, something like that. That was a stat that I had read recently. So you are expanding at Hanyang University and the Netherlands and elsewhere. Yeah, share a little bit about your vision, for Korea, your vision in these respective places, and yeah, what do you hope to achieve there?
Well, through our university partnerships and the centers of excellence like at Hanyang and the others I mentioned, and more as we go forward, but also through our other educational partnerships, we just helped create something called the Global Alliance for Conscious Business Education, where there are business schools that are all over the world that have professors that actually are trying to create together a kind of integrated curriculum that can kind of advance what they call conscious business practices, which are very aligned with the economics mutuality principles. But we need to get data into that. So we've got all these case studies that we're building from work that we're doing around the world with different companies. And we need academics to help contextualize that work so that we can scale up the learning so that we can turn our business case studies into teaching case studies. So one of the things that Hanyang is going to be doing is helping to contextualize the economics of mutuality approach for the Asian marketplace, starting in Korea, but also expanding into other parts of Asia, and then working with us to convert that data that we're collecting from this work with businesses through our consultancy, put that through our foundation, put it through into these institutions, create a business curriculum. Just before our interview today, I got off a call with the professors at Hanyang University who have launched this new Economics and Mutuality Center with us for Asia, and we agreed on what's called a train the educators course that our foundation puts on that we're going to do in about 2 or 3 weeks from now for a set of business school professors from that university, so that we can teach them how they can integrate these learnings into the way they teach their students. And we've done that at a Tecnológico de Monterrey University in Mexico, and we'll be doing it in Barcelona at Barcelona Management School later in the year. This is kind of the way that we're trying to contextualize and scale up what it is we're doing. We've also pivoted in the bigger vision space over the last maybe 12 months or so to what's called a kind of place-based orientation. And we've been focusing on companies and trying to get companies and help them transform their approaches to become more purpose-centric. That's still very much what we want to do, but it's very slow going to do that one company at a time. So one of the things that we're doing now is we're trying to figure out how we can bring investment and a kind of a blended finance platform approach to regions of the world, to communities and regions of multiple communities. So we're partnering with a US based organization and just made an announcement, actually, either today or yesterday, at Davos at the World Economic Forum about a partnership that we now have with a company called Second Muse, which is very good at creating place-based projects in places like Indonesia. So we're going to start, I think, in Sulawesi, in the cocoa fields of Sulawesi, and we're going to be looking at how we can together create a blended finance platform that can help bring investment in and help invest in a cluster of small and medium-sized enterprises that can help deliver the outcomes that both philanthropic and other type of development-oriented impact investors really want to see that they can't get through their traditional approaches. So we're trying to uplift these regions, these communities. I'll be going to Memphis next month, actually, to explore working with some entities there that are trying to do a major urban renewal project. And we want to bring economics of mutuality in. Louisville, Kentucky is another place. We just did a loneliness study there, funded by family offices that have iconic local businesses. And we're going to expand from there.
Oh, excellent. And tell me about the work you've done in Singapore, where you brought together the government and different stakeholders. Do you want to just quickly share
Sure,
that?
absolutely. Yeah, in Singapore, we did a small piece of work for one of their larger banks last year, which was really around aging demographics. The bank wanted to become more of a player in having a positive impact on this aging demographic issue, but they wanted to understand it better. So we went in and very quickly developed an ecosystem map for them that enlarged their perspective of the kind of stakeholders that they would have to engage as a bank, and that they actually had the ability to engage if they wanted to move the needle. In this Economics of Mutuality Foundation that owns a consultancy called Mutual Value Labs, we also have a second foundation called the Human Flourishing Foundation that I'm on the board of directors of that and helped create it. And so is Kwang Kim, I think you know from used to run the
Yes.
Asia Foundation in Seoul and is helping us launch this Hanyang Center. And we put on an event in Singapore in 2024 through the Human Flourishing Foundation, which was all about how do you measure human flourishing in a community, and what is the role of vocation or greater individual purpose in actually helping to bring about human flourishing. So we brought some real experts together in human flourishing measurement and in vocation, and we brought them to Singapore, and we used our network there that we've been building for over 20 years of people who are very influential across different sectors of society, of the economy, from government to investment to family offices, to every sort of stakeholder that you could think of. We brought 30 of them together in Singapore, and we spent a couple of days really just drilling into what is the role of business in bringing about human flourishing in Singapore. What is the role of faith organizations in doing so? What's the role of the government? What's the role of the banking sector? We did that, and I think what we were able to do is to stimulate some cross fertilization and some collaboration among people who knew of each other in Singapore, but didn't realize before we brought them together that they're all trying to do the same thing, but looking at things through the perspective of their sector of the economy. We tried to do that again in Seoul. You were part of that,
Yes.
Sylvia, as well. And we ran a similar event in Seoul. And I'm excited to say that was done in November. And just since that time, there have been several organic efforts that have kind of broken out in Korea to take this work significantly further and really look at this potentially being a future model for the reconstruction of North Korea, for example, when the time comes for that. So we're just really excited to put the right people together around the right issues and try to stimulate their thinking because, we don't have all the answers. We need to be humble about what we're doing and know that there are others we need to partner with, to collaborate with on a humble journey of co-creation in this. And that's what we're trying to do, this effort.
Excellent. I'm so thrilled to hear about the offshoots. That's really exciting. So, Jay, is there anything else you want to share about your work before we shift gears into, who inspire you? What else do our listeners need to know about what you're doing? Any results, challenges, highs?
Well, there'll always be challenges in this, and the one thing that has kept me going through 19 years of being part of the leadership of this initiative is that no obstacle is too big to be overcome, and we just have to have faith that there's always a way through, over, around obstacles that are thrown up in our pathway, and we just have to keep on keeping on because this is too important. Business can't be just about financial profitability for shareholders, but shareholders also have to realize that by solving problems from others, they don't have to sacrifice their earnings. So why not do this? If you can do more good and still have a healthy, robust return on your investment, why wouldn't you want to operate this way and solve problems? It takes persistence and collaboration to break down all these barriers of disbelief. Because remember, the world of financial capitalism has kind of taken on a life of its own and a belief system that if you want to have, you need to take from others, extract value from an ecosystem around you, and keep it for yourself. When our belief is actually no, if you want to have prosperity, you need to actually co create it with others by helping them solve some of their problems and obstacles, improve their livelihoods. And what you will find is if you're putting purpose at the center of what it is you're doing and building your ecosystem of collaborators, with stakeholders that you can then help, that can help you deliver that purpose by helping them solve some of their problems, they actually wind up bringing that profit to you anyway. So if you're not chasing the money, if you're actually chasing the purpose, then the money winds up chasing you. But people don't believe this because they just have been taught that you have to take from others and keep as much of that as possible for yourself. And that zero sum world is coming to an end. And part of the reason is because financial capitalism was created because there was a lack of money, financial capital in the global economy in 1970 when Milton Friedman created the model to solve that problem. Well, that problem is solved. We have a massive amount of financial capital in the world today, much more than is needed. And it's not underpinned by any form of real value, no gold standard, no basket of commodities that it's underpinned by. It's only underpinned by the confidence that people have in it, that it has value. That means it's very unstable. The real value of money could drop very significantly overnight. So if companies are not working with social capital, with human capital, with natural capital, that are now the forms of scarcity, that if you have them, they're more valuable, and they also contribute to your top and bottom line financially, then you're going to be in big trouble when you have another economic shock.
Now, with AI on the rise, and it's a double-edged sword, how does that affect your model, your work, your thinking? I mean, is
No, I'm
it
glad
just
you asked that because
business as usual? Or yes, go ahead.
you called it a double-edged sword. That's exactly what it is for our work as well. I mean, we're finding that automating more of what it is we're doing and utilizing AI to create digital tools to do that significantly shortens the time frame for us to be able to deliver what it is we deliver, ecosystem maps and interventions and so forth. And by doing that, we can lower the price point and we can make this work much more available to small and medium-sized enterprises instead of just large corporations. So that's really important to use AI in a constructive way. But as we start to become more place-based and we're looking at left behind communities, ones that are underserved, we're finding that there's a very significant dependence of a very poor population in most urban areas and rural ones as well. But in the urban areas we're looking at, on a small number of employers that are often very vulnerable to job disruption by AI, by automation. And so these communities, which are already suffering severe economic dislocation, can become their problems could become exacerbated many times over if AI eliminates, half of their jobs overnight. So, we've really got to be looking at the disruptions that AI can cause, but also the incredible value that AI brings to being able to solve problems. So, calling it a double-edged sword couldn't be clearer.
Thank you for sharing that. And how does this economics of mutuality framework, how does that apply to someone like me who's working or, marketing director or investor? How do we work with purpose? How do we be better? I mean, we may not be working front lines in the slums, but do you have any words of advice for us?
Well, I mean, the purpose doesn't have to be something that is requiring a sacrifice. I think that's one of the things to keep in mind. Being purpose driven just makes sense. As an individual, I think, why are we here? That gets to
Yeah.
the bigger question of life. I mean, when I look at the end of my life, what is it that I feel good about? I think it's trying to live out my gifting, my purpose, which is greater than just myself. If it's all about wanting to earn as much money and keep it for myself and buy more things. I mean, I think I'm gonna find out that my life was empty
Yes.
at the end of the day. So
Yes.
purpose really is at the center of everything. What we're trying to do is actually help companies understand that relationships are what drives the health or lack of health of their business activity. That really the fulfillment of their greater purpose through their work is absolutely essential. And there may have been well, there was a time in the world where relationships between business and people was more transactional, but that was when there was a social contract where companies could guarantee lifetime employment for people. And so people were willing to sacrifice caring about what it was they were doing and whether it was good for the world, good for their purpose, for the security that they thought they had with companies. Well, it's not like that anymore.
Yes.
The social contract has been broken around the world. The idea of the kuretsu is really limited now, like they have in Japan, and lifetime employment is a thing of the past. And so companies now have to recognize that loyalty that they used to just expect from their employees is not there. That the loyalty will come from satisfying people's purpose in life. And so, we all need to be satisfied that we're doing something for the bigger purpose in our existence. And if we're not, we're just going to move on and do something else. Companies are finding that out. And so when you talk to any HR professional, they'll say, yeah, we're in a war for talent. So if you want to address your war for talent and keep the best and the brightest and recruit them, you're going to have to start thinking about purpose and how to engage people in that.
Right. And generationally with Gen Z, are they different from
Yeah, absolutely.
boomers? Yeah.
They demand something more in life than just a job, and they care very much about whether that company that they're working for is contributing to the common good in some way, or whether it's creating problems that they then spend their private time, demonstrating against or trying to solve through charity or volunteerism or whatever it may be. And there are ways in which we could all be working together to solve these problems.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just I come from a baby boomer generation that maybe was more focused on materialism, and that is just not the case in the generations that have succeeded me.
Thank you for sharing that. And
Maybe that's because the problems have become so big that they're going
right.
to bring everybody down if we don't work together.
Yes, absolutely. And the baby boomers are probably reacting to their parents and grandparents, the Great Depression, the scarcity mindset. And
Absolutely, yeah. We come across, we're working more with family offices too, and we come across the next generation of family business leaders that are in family offices that are really not motivated to take over their family businesses because they really see the way in which those companies have been created and kind of some of the damage that they cause. And I'm no pie in the sky idealist. I mean,
yeah,
I'm a real realist in this, and I just see that there's a better way of doing things. That if you can expand your definition of performance as a company owner or as a company leader beyond one form of capital to encompass all four forms of capital and recognize that non-financial value, which creates measurable impact for people and planet and communities, actually contributes to your business performance in a very, very positive way and drags on your business performance if you're actually depleting social, human, and natural capital, polluting the rivers, causing lack of trust in communities, hurting the well-being of individuals. If you're doing those things, you don't see the drag on your performance and the opportunity by reversing that it can create for your performance. So this is what drives me is the realism aspect of this. Even though I run a nonprofit that's a foundation that happens to own a business, our mentality really is that value creation is what this is all about, and mutual value creation that benefits all stakeholders is not only possible and practical, but it's happening. You don't have to hope for the ideal situation in the world that business actually can create value for everyone. It's here. You just have to embrace it. Take some risks, step out of the
right.
boat.
So if you had a magic wand and can do anything, you had absolute power and authority, what would you do to help heal the world?
Well, I mean, this is what I'm trying to do that. I don't think we need a magic wand to do that. There's an expression that Jewish people have in the Hebrew language. It's called tikkun olam, which really motivates me. It means kind of repair or heal the world.
Yes.
And really, this work sometimes I feel convicted because as I explain what it is we're doing to business leaders and others, that maybe it comes across as a clever new way of making money in a new global economic context. And that's kind of not the point. The point of all this is about healing. And I think that this approach that puts purpose at the center is really about healing the broken relationships that business has with people and that business has with the planet. I don't think anyone in their right mind can argue that those relationships are not broken in many different ways. That's not to condemn business. It's simply to say that these relationships need healing. And I also find that that healing the self is also really critical as well.
Yes.
As
Yes.
individuals, we suffer from traumas, we suffer from
Yes.
unforgiveness, we suffer from physical and emotional types of damage just in the broken world in which we live and operate. And that healing is just as important as the healing that business can bring. And so, part of my life's work is really to try to bring a better understanding of healing the body, mind, and spirit to everybody that we're working with in a business context as well as individual relationships to show that you don't have to live like this. You don't have to live as a broken, hurting, unforgiving type of individual. Unforgiveness is a big block for healing, I find in people's lives.
Absolutely.
And someone told me once that unforgiveness of others and unforgiveness of yourself, but think about unforgiving someone else. It's like taking a spoonful of poison every day and hoping that it makes the other person sick.
Yeah.
The only person that gets sick is
Yes,
you. So a lot
exactly.
of this toxicity, cancer, all these
Yes.
afflictions that we face,
Yes.
mental illness, this stuff can be healed in many different ways. And some of it, the root is unforgiveness. So we need to work on that too.
Yes, I couldn't
It's all
agree
part of the
more.
same thing.
I couldn't
Heal
agree
business, heal the
more.
world, heal the
Yes.
individual.
Yes. Well, let me ask another from another angle. If you had, I don't know, $10 billion, how would you use it to do the work you're doing?
Well, I think probably I would start, charity starts at home, as they say. First thing I'd do is pay off all my own debts because I don't think we're intended to be indebted. Indebtedness is really kind of living beyond your means at the expense of somebody else. So I'd first want to be clear of debts. And then I would make sure that the organization that I'm involved in, that I've had the privilege to be part of for almost 2 decades, would continue to be able to carry forward the good news of how business can really be transformed for the common good in ways that are good for business. Would invest in this healing of the individual, and there are ways to empower people to do that. And it's really by just helping them understand that healing can be theirs for the taking. That they don't have to live like this. And so communications is a big part of all this. And one of the reasons I was excited to come on your show, Sylvia, is because I know that you're a communicator, that you have a following, that you're out there as an influencer of people, and it's people like you that need to have content to to share with people. Because without you, we're going to be working in the dark. People are not going to know that there's a better way, and there is a better way.
I could not agree more, Jay. So, this is a calling, clearly. Who influenced you? Who influenced you in your calling, or what motivated you?
Really, I think it was my faith more than anything else. That when you recognize that there's someone greater than you, your creator, that has a greater plan for you than you can ever imagine, and gives you gifts that if you follow them wherever they lead, that actually you'll have a fulfillment that you could never experience otherwise. I mean, that's the most important thing to me. I also have
Yes.
a life partner in my wife Eleni, who I admire greatly. She and I have been married for over 4 decades now. Believe it or not, we married very young, but yeah, she's a six-time survivor of cancer,
Oh,
and yet
yes.
never gets down. I mean, she just continues to, courageously push through any obstacle that comes, in front of her. So having her together with me at my side as a partner in everything we do, is a real inspiration as we go forward. And just recognizing that this tikkun olam, this, if I can borrow that phrase again from the Jewish people, this heal or repair the world is my calling, is my vocation. I can humbly play some small role in advancing that. I mean, that gives me such great fulfillment that the moment that I recognized that almost 20 years ago now, when I moved into this company Mars and then out of it with this economics of mutuality work as a vocation, work never didn't become work anymore. for me. And it's the kind of thing that, what would you do if you weren't getting paid for it? If you didn't have to worry about, getting paid,
Yes,
what would you do to fulfill your calling? And I think if you pursue those things, the money will follow. You don't have
absolutely.
the security will follow. You don't have to be worried about that. Provision will be there, but you've got to be faithful in the small things, and then you'll be entrusted in with greater things.
That's
There's one last
beautiful.
thing I'd like to mention
Yes,
is
please.
that I'm really inspired by the words of the wise King Solomon. Everybody knows King Solomon lived about 3,000 years ago, and he was known for, being the wisest man on the planet. And he said something that was really inspiring to me at the beginning. 3,000 years ago, he said, "One may give freely, and still wealth will be increased, and another may keep back more than is right, but comes to be in need." And I think that gets to the question that John Mars was asking in 2007 that inspired the work of the Economics of Mutuality at Mars and then outside, which was what's the right level of profit? I think people have been asking this question for 3,000 years or more, but we lost track of that right level of profit, a little over 50 years ago in 1970, 56 years ago now, when Milton Friedman introduced financial capitalism, because we suddenly interpreted that as a zero sum game, that we need to take as much from others and keep for ourselves. And that's the only way we're going to have anything. And we rationalized that by thinking all the boats are going to float if we're all pursuing wealth for our own devices. And actually, I just don't think that that is the way value should be created, that we can help each other and we can do it in a very realistic, pragmatic way.
Excellent. Okay, I want to ask some rapid fire questions before we wrap up. If you could meet anyone from history, who would it be?
Meet anyone from history. Oh my goodness. Good question. I'm actually a historian by training, so there's hundreds of people that I would love to.
Okay, maybe the
I
question.
always, I always tell my wife that I always tell my wife I was born in the wrong century. Actually, I should have been born in, 100 years earlier to do something like that.
Yeah.
But again, my faith drives me. So Jesus Christ would be the first person
Yes.
I would want to meet, and I know I'm
Yes.
going to meet him one day. So
Yes. Yes.
I'll, uh,
Amen.
I'll bide my time until
Amen.
then.
Okay. And if you could describe yourself as an animal, which animal would that be?
As an animal,
Yes. This is rapid fire, Jay.
very good. Okay, I would say probably. You know me now that I'm probably twice as tall as you are. So
Yes, you are. You're a very tall
probably
man.
an elephant, because an elephant actually is hopefully really intelligent. I'd like to be really intelligent. Is also as big and can move things, but is also very, very deeply caring and remembers everything. So that'd probably be the animal.
Yes, and I vouch for that. And what is your favorite quote or life motto? What's your life motto?
I think it's the one that I just shared. One may
Yes,
give
yes.
freely and
Okay,
still
then
also be
let's
increased,
say
and
your
another may
favorite
keep back
quote.
more than
Another
is right
one.
and come to be in need. Okay, another one would be ask and it shall be given to you, seek and you'll find, knock and the door shall be open to you. So I mean, we just need to keep at it. I have a dear friend named Steve Garber, who I think you may have met in Korea. I brought him out there to participate in what it was we were doing together. And Steve is a brilliant writer on vocation and an author and a mentor to many, including myself. And Steve developed this concept that's called the proximate justice, he calls it. And it's that, very often we are give up too easily because the problems that we want to solve are just too big and we can't find perfection. We can't solve the problem. Steve says, no, we need to be satisfied with the proximate. We need to just keep at it. That if we can do what it is that we can do to move the needle, that's enough. And we need to keep pursuing the proximate because we're not going to be able to solve every problem and we can't do it by ourselves. We need to do it together. So I love this idea of the proximate. And I think that's what gives me this kind of sense of eternal optimism that we're going to persevere and we're going to prevail in this. We just have to keep at it, no matter what the obstacles are. And if we can't, solve cancer, if we can't solve world hunger, if we can't uplift every community, if we can't, you know, get rid of impoverishment globally, that we shouldn't do it. We shouldn't try. I think that, we need to focus on what we can do, how much we can move the needle, and that'll be fulfilling enough.
So beautifully said. Thank you so much, Jay, for being on my show. I'm so honored to hear all of your stories and your vision and mission. And if anyone watching would like to get in touch with Jay, reach out to him on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for watching. And
It's
Jay,
really
yeah,
humbling to be on. Thank you, Sylvia. Our website, by the way, is really easy to remember,
yes, please.
eom.org, Economics of Mutuality, eom.org. So thank you, Sylvia. Really humbling
Excellent.
to be on this show. Thank
I'll
you.
bring you back another time. Thank you, Jay.